Aterrados, translated from Spanish as Terrified, is a 2017 Argentinian supernatural horror written and directed by Damian Rugna, who is perhaps best known for his grotesque demonic possession horror When Evil Lurks, which I consider to be the scariest film of 2023. Aterrados, which I will henceforth refer to as Terrified because I'm most likely pronouncing it wrong, tells the story of a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside the city of Buenos Aires, where, after a series of strange occurrences and deaths, lead three paranormal investigators and a reluctant cop to investigate the presence of a malevolent entity lurking between the various afflicted houses in the hopes of banishing it before it can spread further harm to the other residents. What ensues is a uniquely grim tale of ghoulish, multi-dimensional horrors told from several perspectives, as it ambiguously blends together ghostly, demonic, and cosmic qualities, leaving you to question and interpret your understanding of events. The way I see it, Damian Rugna is Argentina's answer to Damian McCarthy. Maybe it's in their names, but if you like caveat, oddity, hokum, and Rugna's own When Evil Lurks, Terrified delivers concise and compelling scares whilst building a bleak and unsettling world that alludes beyond the incident at play. While for me the film's biggest flaw is its frustratingly abrupt ending, it's still a pretty lean 85-minute watch that meticulously weaves between multiple characters, experiencing a brutal, unpredictable, and ever-evolving haunting that ends up becoming far more bizarre and otherworldly than you initially suspect. Outside When Evil Lurks and Damian McCarthy's filmography, I think the best comparison to Terrified would be the interdimensional madness of Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist, mixed with the subdued, cursed interconnectedness of Takashi Shimizu's Ju-On the Grudge, and just a little hint of Insidious to add a flavor of chaos. Those are all solid recommendations in their own right, so I've certainly set the bar high for Terrified, but if I'm being nitpicky, it's not as polished as When Evil Lurks, which I think improves on all the components at play in Terrified, so at the very least, it's interesting to see how Damian Rugna develops upon his work. As always, if you have any thoughts or theories on the film, please share them with me in the comments below, along with any requests for future videos. And now, when you're ready, brace yourself. Now, on the topic of interdimensional traveling beings, my fiance and I are getting married in a few weeks, and she wants us to get an eSIM for traveling on our honeymoon to Switzerland, and her friends recommended Sealy, and I said, leave it to me, and that's why this video is sponsored by Sealy. I mean, you gotta pay those wedding bills somehow. As an anxious traveler who always fears being lost abroad, I rely heavily on having internet access, but when there's no Wi-Fi available, I end up paying an ungodly amount of money on roaming fees. I still haven't fully recovered from New York 2 years ago. Sealy is an affordable, time-saving eSIM that offers global and regional data plans in over 200 destinations that significantly cut down and even eliminate roaming fees to give you both peace of mind and allow you to put your travel budget to better use. You simply download the Sealy app, buy a plan, and follow simple instructions to install a digital eSIM directly onto your phone that you can activate the moment you arrive at your destination. Rather than buying a dodgy SIM on arrival, Sealy offers 24/7 support, security features for safer browsing, and a built-in ad blocker to save precious data for when you need it the most. If you download the Sealy app or go to sealy.com/ryanhollinger, you can get an exclusive 15% off on Sealy data plans by using my code ryanhollinger at checkout. And if you do so, let me know where you travel. Actually, wait, no, that sounds creepy. Don't use that bit. Terrified wastes no time setting the scene for its horror, as we open to a woman called Clara hearing what appear to be breathing noises and voices inside her kitchen sink, which she later informs her husband Juan are telling her they will kill her. During the early hours of the next day, while Clara takes a shower, Juan begins experiencing his own disturbances via banging in the walls, which he accuses his neighbor Walter of causing, not realizing that Walter is actually dealing with his own demons we've yet to see. After failing to confront Walter but obliviously alluding to Walter's ordeal, Juan returns home to find the banging has intensified within, prompting him to check on Clara, to which he he suddenly witnesses her bloodied corpse being suspended and brutally bashed against the bathroom walls by what we can suspect at this point is a poltergeist. This right here is the suitably jarring tempo the film commits to moving forward. The tension is eerie, quiet, and restrained before escalating to bewildering, overwhelming, and oftentimes gruesome terror. I understand many people find jump scares to be reductively taboo, but Damien Rugna doesn't rely on those cheap, motorized, reactionary jump scares. The shock is often naturalistic and fits with the emotional state of the character in that moment. Thus, what we have are classical techniques pulled off very effectively and even thematically with how acutely volatile and unpredictable the threat is ultimately presented to be. As a result of such traumatic and questionable events, Juan is institutionalized and soon interviewed by 3 people, later revealed to be the paranormal investigators, who claim to believe his story as it takes on a similar quality to several mysterious deaths that happened in the US in 1998. What you'll see from here is that the film deploys a subtly unconventional narrative structure, because while it is framed as a classical third-person story, the distinction is that the film never strictly locks us into a singular perspective or protagonist to drive the plot forward, but rather it freely maneuvers between differing points of view that come with their own unique scares. It's not necessarily on the same non-chronological interconnected level as Magnolia, Pulp Fiction, or most recently Weapons, but if we're being obnoxiously snobby, you could say like Ju-on the Grudge, it makes this story about one seemingly anomalous event feel like a full-bodied experience where you're seeing the world live and breathe organically from every angle. We flash back 2 weeks prior to the opening events to see Juan's neighbor Walter attempt to desperately seek the help of a paranormal investigator called Maura Albrecht regarding his furniture moving at night. It gives context to Juan's perspective, as he simply believed Walter was remodeling his home, unaware of the fact that Walter was actually being haunted by a sinister humanoid that strongly reminded me of the Rake creepypasta, a sort of paralysis demon mournfully watching you from the corner of your bed. This is the first instance where the paranormal meets the greater unknown, because the creature is never explicitly referred to as a spirit, as the investigators notably avoid giving labels to what they think they're dealing with. It gives this bollock naked being's origins a very striking enigma for the story, because while it seems to be just chilling rent-free in Walter's house, we do eventually come to learn that whatever it is, it also feeds on human blood. Besides the obvious visual excellence of the entity's unnatural and haunting presence, the film plays off those classical childhood horror tropes of the monster under the bed or hiding in the closet, and that attempt to protect yourself under the bed sheets to strongly accentuate Walter's fear and vulnerability. The thing is, while Terrified sounds like a very generic title for the film, it's actually thematically fitting to how it taps into our innate perception of the unknown. As one investigator later states, fear is contagious, as each character throughout openly acknowledges how terrified they are of dealing with a threat that we later come to learn they ultimately know very little about. But more on this later. After Walter is attacked by the entity, the next morning we see a little boy innocuously attempting to retrieve his football from Walter's garden, but after taking a hit of hose water, a detail that will come into play later, Walter seemingly scares the boy onto the street, where he is suddenly mowed down by an oncoming bus. If you're familiar with When Evil Lurks, then you'll know that Damien Rugna has absolutely no fear of obliterating children in his movies, as this kid's death becomes the grotesque central catalyst for the investigation when we're introduced to perhaps the closest character we have to a central protagonist, Police Sergeant Funes, who for the record is only 2 weeks away from retirement. I promise not to spoil When Evil Lurks for those who still haven't seen it, but Funes' characterization is not too dissimilar from Pedro in When Evil Lurks, in how they're slight subversions to the stoic hero father figure protagonist, in how their flawed and fallible demeanors result in careless, ignorant, destructive actions that ultimately do way more harm than good. In the case of Funes, I appreciate that he's not your archetypical cynical skeptic of the supernatural. He's pretty accepting of the fact, as long as it solves a problem he's not willing to stomach, as he admits to not only being a severely cowardly man, but has ongoing health concerns related to hearing and coagulation that make him unwilling to deal with potentially dangerous circumstances. It doesn't play significantly into his character arc so much as it does define a decision he makes at the end, as his presence effectively serves more as a feeble vessel for the audience to learn about the otherworldly threat from each of the three eccentric ghost hunters. Anyway, the evening following the boy's funeral, his grieving mother Alicia discovers muddy footprints outside her home, leading her ex-boyfriend Funes to contact a former forensic coroner turned paranormal investigator called Hanno after we learn that the corpse of the boy literally returned home and is now sitting in the kitchen with cereal, milk, and cookies. Yeah, I had to withhold this image as long as humanly possible because it is demonetization galore. Now, the thing is, I really hope I'm not the only one who thinks this, but morbidity aside, there is something so extremely darkly comedic about how casual this reveal is. It's actually one of my favorite world-building details from When Evil Lurks, where many of the characters are just exhausted and depressingly willing to accept the existence of the paranormal without question, which gives the world a distinct flavor that, in the case of When Evil Lurks, made it feel almost borderline apocalyptic at times. But again, more on this later. While Hanno deals with the cursed and seemingly possessed decaying corpse of the child, across the street, Mora arrives to deal with the now missing Walter, eventually seeing both parties team up with a further colleague called Rosentalk, who I could not help but think was Hugo Weaving for most of the movie, to connect the dots between the three afflicted houses. This brings us back to the present, where the film gives us a valid reason to split up the investigators, as due to precious time they each take a house to observe, leading to a series of increasingly strange events that I'll admit I'm not entirely sure how to explain, but I think that's kind of the point. It was this enigmatic quality that sold me on making this video, because while the film could just settle into a safe, spooky house of jump scares, it leaves much of what happens open to speculation, as it sows the seeds of a far more cosmic evil, hence why calling the threat spirits seems misrepresentative. The closest we come to an answer is a theory by Mora that the universe is composed of multiple coexisting dimensions, and that these entities are microscopic beings that travel through water so they can infect human hosts, nest, and reproduce. It is as batshit insane as it sounds, but essentially it's not too far off the loose apocalyptic concept of When Evil Lurks, where it's as if our world is being quietly invaded by a destructive force that manifests like a disease. However, the way I see it, these dimensions are not so much coexisting as they are fighting to consume each other, and that we are simply caught in the middle of it because we are too powerless, clueless, and insignificant to fight back. This ultimately ends up being the hopeless bombshell Funes is faced with when Mora basically tells him they do not know how to stop what's happening. It's such a brilliantly grounded twist on the overly capable demon/ghost hunting experts we're so typically used to seeing in these kinds of stories, because in real life, these people are just falsely confident, fear-mongering grifters. I just love that instead of being reliably certain lore dumping, oh, we've been fighting these creatures for centuries, I don't know why I did it in that voice, here we have three investigators who, sure, believe in what they do, but in reality have no fucking idea what they're actually doing besides poking and prodding at the cosmic bear. It's not played for laughs, but it is hilariously frank how Funes is quickly ready to bail the fuck out of there when he realizes how futile the entire endeavor is. Circumstances only continue to get more convoluted when Mora also warns Funes that the entities will try to play tricks on him and to not believe everything he sees, which ties into an earlier implication Rosentalk makes about the entities possibly being able to manipulate time and space. There is a loose point made that suggests that the characters are in some sort of cosmic bubble that doesn't play by conventional logic, such as Rosentalk explaining that because the two realities of light and darkness share the same space, this dictates how the characters see the entities. It is confusing, but the jargonism is actually pretty on point with these kinds of eccentric investigators, where Funes just doesn't know how to take in any of the information he's given, resulting in his eventual just burn it to the ground mentality that understandably most of us would jump to when your experts prove fucking useless. The only certainty we do know is that the entities definitely feed on human blood, as it happens to Rosentalk after he's stabbed by a levitating knife built around the telekinetic energy of the creature, which Funes is then forced to clean up, otherwise it will seemingly trigger the creature's more feral instincts. Naturally, shit soon hits the fan when Funes finds Juano trapped in a cupboard with glass shards rammed into his eyes, prompting him to run across the street to get help from Mora, only for her to get her neck brutally snapped by a creature emerging from a crack in the wall that serves as an interdimensional nest between Juan and Walter's houses. Now, brace yourself for this speedrun. Funes then, understandably, has a fucking heart attack, but manages to recover and bail out of the house after his ex-girlfriend Alicia awakens from her sleeping sedatives and decides to take her decaying corpse of a son away, only for us to see the mangled corpse of Mora running towards Funes begging for his help. Yes, this scare was blatantly taken by Smile. Once the madness finally settles, Funes takes a morally conflicted smoke break before returning to the site after he learns that his colleague Enrique has gone there to find him. By the way, it's worth noting that I have skimmed over a lot of details in the story that you'll just have to watch and find for yourself, but the night ends after Funes burns down the houses, yet not before finding Alicia tragically hanged either by the entities or from the grief of moving her son's corpse. We cut to 1 year later back at the institution, where Juan is once again interviewed by investigators looking into the deaths of the 3 paranormal experts and Alicia, as well as the destruction of the houses, claiming Funes has become a fugitive and also wanted in connection to Clara's death. In the end, the entities win, as the final moments see Juan claim to see the charred up spirit of Rosentalk lurking behind the men before the unseen entity attacks them. As I said at the start, I felt the ending was disappointingly abrupt and underwhelming, as it makes the story feel incomplete, but at the very least I can respect it as a creative choice to tie back into the notion of showing us a world where our existence is futile and just a small blip in a never-ending world of horrors that exist beyond our common dimension. As always, leave your thoughts and requests below, stay safe, stay away from cracks in the wall, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.